Okay, as you know, D-Day, D+1, Jim's 3rd Battalion, 506 was on their D-Day objective, the wooden bridges on the Dew River closer to Carentan. And when they pulled them out of there, they came over to defend this little peninsula. It's a peninsula because all this area around here was kind of semi-flooded and swampy. And at times it was actually so deep with water that people were rolling around in boats out. A little bit farther up here, Lieutenant Simone, S-E-M-O-N, from F Company 506, his whole stick jumped flying this way towards the coast, and he, being the jump master, first one out, he landed in the swamp up here and drowned. And the guys behind him were steering their chutes, and they actually, one of them actually landed right on the rail embankment, just barely missed drowning, and the other ones landed farther in towards Whoville. When you read F Company book that Terry Poiser's coming out with later this year, there'll be a lot of details about that stick. But that company had people drop here, they had people drop right in the square at St. Mary Glees 45 minutes before the 505, and John Steele and all them landed there. And they had people that landed way over near St. Brie-du-Mont. So that company was spread out over the whole northern half of the 101st area of operations. But anyways, Jim was here for 2-3 days?
3 days.
Okay. Now, do you remember using this as a reference where your foxhole line was? Were you facing on this side of the boat? Were you facing that way, or were you facing this way? Can you remember? Or?
You know where the road goes down to the levee on the river.
Walk around this way and see.
Well,
let's walk around here and see. See, here's an aerial view of where we're at. We crossed over the tracks and we're going near Saint-Come-de-Mont somewhere, but he says he had quite a walk to get from where he landed to the bridges. The amazing thing, he jumped with a tube from a 60mm mortar cradled in his arms, so he couldn't grab his risers or steer or anything, but he had practiced this in England, so he knew how to do it. That's a pretty heavy, how much does that tube weigh, Jim?
37 pounds.
Okay.
Jump with a mortar tube
So he
in his
jumps
arm?
like, yeah, you know, all his equipment and the tube.
That was that one thing that was an option. You could jump, you could either put the thing in a leg bag or in a pack underneath the plane, or carry it with you.
Was your rifle in the Griswold bag that night, or did you have...
I carried my rifle in a Griswold bag under my reserve, yeah, along with it.
You didn't have to have a sidearm, did you?
No.
Okay.
None of us were, there were no sidearms issued. Now a lot of officers had their individual sidearms, which they bought themselves. And they all, now all these people say trench knives were issued. They never issued a trench knife to any of us. Okay. I had one because my company made them and they sent me one. Now that's another story. This happened in Normandy. I had this trench knife, and Don Francis, he wanted that thing in the worst way, so just before D-Day I sold it to him for $6. And it had my name on it, on the scabbard. Well, each day a company commander would go to the aid station to see who was killed that day. And he went down there and he was picking them up, and he said, one guy said, "Yeah, Martin got killed today." And he said, "Well, who, Martin? What are you talking about?" And he said, "Yeah, Pee Wee got killed." And he said, "No, he didn't get killed. I saw him." "Yeah, he is." And I said, "Where is he?" "He's laying over there in that pile." He went over there and looked, and it was Don Francis. He didn't have dog tags on, but he had that scabbard on. And he said they already had the telegram made out to send to my mother.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? I didn't know that until 10 years ago. Wow.
You're looking like you're in pretty good shape for a dead man.
Yeah.
Was Don Francis a smaller guy like you, or was...
He was thin and maybe an inch or two taller than me.
And how much did you weigh when you jumped in Normandy?
134.
He jumped with his mortar tube and parachute and all that equipment with an M1.
That's a lot.
That's why these guys are my heroes.
Yeah, she's right.
And,
Jim, how come you didn't how come you didn't jump with it in the leg bag?
because I wanted to get it out, because I had a leg bag full of ammunition. I had mortar rounds in the leg bag.
Yeah, he had a leg bag.
So,
He already had a leg bag.
So you probably weighed 300 pounds jumping,
yeah,
didn't you? Probably.
I carried as much as I weighed. There was a renegade group of Germans, about a company size, a motley group of different units trying to get back the German lines, and we ran into them. We only had 25 or 26 guys, and they got us pinned down. And Don was laying on my left up against my shoulder, and he got hit in the right forward with a machine gun shell. Lieutenant Sanasario came in on our left flank then after about 10 minutes, and he started firing from there, and we were firing from here, and they gave up. And Sanasario was kind of a tough guy, but in this instance, he said, these guys are all prisoners of war, and you're going to treat them that way. So some of our guys, plus a medic, started treating them. And after about 10 minutes, a big, tall German came out of some bushes with an MG-42 over his shoulder. And I've said many times, if we'd mistreated those guys, we'd all been machine gunned. That's one of those strange things that goes on.
So he gave himself up?
Yeah, when he saw we weren't going to mistreat him, he gave up.
Wow.
If you stand in the gate when you take a picture. I went like this, and I felt the breeze going by, and a second later, that engineer was
I can see where that could sneak up on you. You could bear that.
Position was here. He said he was on the embankment facing this way, and the Germans are right on the other side of this body of water. They stuck their heads up here. They draw fire immediately from over on the other side.
Yep, definitely.
Okay.
Wow.
Well, let me tell you something else about D-Day.
Okay.
I don't think anybody really got onto it. They gave us Dramamine pills. We'd never taken them before. And a lot of guys, when they hit the ground, they just laid down and went to sleep. And I talked to General Taylor about that. Well, in fact, I sent him George's book to sign. And I'd written in the front of it about taking the Dramamine pills, and I realized it was a humanitarian gesture to make us calm down, but it had terrible consequences. So we talked on the phone about it. And he said, tell me about it. And I said, well, a lot of the guys went to sleep. And then they woke up sometimes the next day and felt bad because they didn't know what happened. And he said, well, I never heard that before. So that's one of the